For the purpose of those who are embarking on Rastafari, can you tell us how the Rastafari movement started?
That is a big history, you know. It's a great portion. March 27. We are that coming out of the tomb where they were buried. And the glad tiding and our historical foundation by the pirates of the earth was laid down to the deepest depths of the earth. But now, since our Messiah's return, it come to the surface that every eyes have to behold it. So our history pertaining to the coming up from, especially in this resurrection, 1930, when His Majesty sit up and really establish His throne to the four winds of the earth and heaven. So, and I've seen from such time, 1930, even up to this time, we have seen a great manifestation of the works of the Father, you know, by bringing I and I together. You know, early days in the 20th century coming up, we had a great prophet by the name of Honorable Marcus Garvey, who enlightened our knowledge, Africa for the African, those at home and those abroad. And that was well appreciated among the black people. And it was a message for us that are in the grave. And that's what part of our first rising, our mind repatriated to Africa. I believe in that time, 3/4 of Jamaica black people were repatriate their mind and their spirit to Africa. And in 1930, His Majesty fulfilled his word as the second event accomplished. Then we have seen the works come before us plainly and very smoothly. Yet we have great tribulation in those fields. We had a brethren that by the name of Bongo Maharaj, David Howell, who was in Ethiopia 1930. He was a Jamaican. And then he he get to attend the coronation of His Majesty. And as soon as the coronation was accomplished, he returned to Jamaica. And then he started to plant this seed in the name of Her Majesty I Selassie King Rastafari. And as we have received advice from our great prophet Marcus Garvey in that early time, say a king shall rise and crown in Africa, and we must lift up our head for our repatriation drawing near. So we have seen that fulfillment. And Bongo Maharaj, David Howell, really manifests a great work in the name of His Majesty I Selassie in Jamaica. And that was a great triumphant victory that we have against the enemies. Yes. And from then time coming on, is a great tribulation. Great tribulation. Yeah, I tell you something, so well, thousands of our brethren gone down the drain. As I said, that prophet waited for die without a sight. You know, and we have seen many of our brethren gone down through Babylon brutality, through you call it seduction. Some in those early days, some of the brethren through Babylon was so terrible against the Rastas in Jamaica. Some men have to live in the hoods. Malnutrition, devour plenty, and then the force of Babylon destroy plenty. But I'm glad today to see how the world covered.
Yeah.
You know, that even the enemy himself want to try to be a friend of I and I.
Yeah.
you know. But through the power of His Majesty, then we give thanks.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
About the early days, tell us a bit more about the actual position you were in as Rasta, trying to spread the word to the rest of the people.
During my youth days coming up, you know, as a youth, start this campaign from I was 13 years old. Go around the street, preaching Rastafari, hear the voice of our elder brother Howell, and by that we use our scripture, because His Majesty says Ethiopian carry the oldest version.
Yeah.
So he taught from his youthful days was to respect, you know, yes, the history of Ethiopia. So that is what we have to use for our strength as a black man history, the scripture. And going around from day to day around the street, preaching in the name of His Majesty. That's how we have great tribulation. I have myself, I was cast in prison several times.
For preaching the word.
I becomes a little prison, a little jailbird for Babylon. You know, them just take I and throw in a jail as them like. Sometimes in a jail for 20 days, 30 days, sometimes 40 days with no charge at all. And not in jail, not in that alone, but beaten too.
The fear of actually taking on Rasta.
You know. I was charged and cast in prison one time, 18 months for rioting. I sure I was committing a riot. You see? I was charged again for the breach of prison law, cast in prison for another year again, and I charged with herb, another year again. You see? So plenty of my days in my years coming up, plenty of my days spent in jail and prison. You see?
It's to where you are.
And for this cause, you know. Not stealing, nor lying to no one, nor try to disturb anyone, but I try to disturb the spirit of men because of his righteousness. You know, and I'm glad for the inspiration that the Father given to I, you know, that I could be able to share this among my brethren. And whosoever have a ear to hear, let him hear. And our nation, Father, I command us to preach His doctrine to our nation, kings of the earth, and all people, until the end come. So in our days coming up, man, there was very great tribulation. 1966, His Majesty came to Jamaica, and that's where we have our changes. At least 1960, we took up a conversation with the university in Jamaica, and we have one of our teacher of the university, a man by the name of the chancellor. The chancellor was a man by the name of Arthur Lewis. He was a black man, and he hear our voice, and then start to send out some researchers to research among Rasta and the police what causes long war among Rasta and police. You know what I mean? Well, from then time you find to say we work up on that 1960 very much, and we get them to drift back a little. But when His Majesty came 66 now, that was an example to all of them. You know, His Majesty told them to leave them alone. I have myself standing in the presence of His Majesty, and there was a superintendent policeman named by the name of London, who in 1954, we had a march through the city, and he carried us about 34 hours, and like I and I down to jail. And stop the march and lock we down to jail. And we spent 32 days in jail. And when he did ask I for, when we were on the journey up the march, and the superintendent asked I for permit. So where your permit? And I hand him my Bible. I already had my Bible in my hand. So I just hand him my Bible and then take it from I. So in their court now, when the judges ask him about how do he attack us on the street, then he says, as you know, he says to the judges, as you know, the police force have a right to stop whatsoever not looking right on the street. So then he asked us where our permit. And he pointed on our individual, said that one, hand him a Bible. So the judges really observed that, you know. Yes, very much. Well, at 1966 now, when His Majesty came, it was a said policeman that His Majesty, after I stand before His Majesty, was looking like I was looking at you, and His Majesty called the said superintendent policeman in Sheraton, we were, and says, ask that man why I'm growing locks at all. The said policeman, London. And he came on to I and says, His Majesty said to us, why you grow your locks at all? So I asked him the question again, what you say? His Majesty to ask why I grow my locks at all? He said, yes. And I asked him the question twice. He said, he doesn't believe me. I says, well, not to say he doesn't believe the eye that His Majesty give us such question, you know. But, all right, I said, all right, okay. Count the Most High to be right and call men the liar. So I started to give him the history of locks. I brought to him first the preceptical order of Hebrews 7.
That was my next question.
Yeah. And I asked, I bring again the status order, the Nazarene order, number 6, and I bring him the saintical name, Revelation 14 and 7. And he was quite amazed with himself, but anyway, he turned to the king, and the king said to him, the king rise and said, warriors, traitors, be still and know that I am he. The king said again to them, says, you leave them alone, for they know what they are doing. They are right. So from that time, all police force withdrawn from Rasta. You know? So travel on the journey, they really sometimes try to disturb Rasta and your herb. Now that is on the point now that, you know, that we have been working for years now to really get them fully underfoot. It's the only way that a policeman will see you on the street and disturb you, whether you be preaching or whether you be move or whatsoever it may be. The only attack him can attack you is herb. With your herb, with the herb. You know what I mean? With the ganja. You know what I mean? That's the only way they attack you. And the way that most of a Rasta man be in the hands of Babylon from that time, he must find you with herb. You know, otherwise from that, them don't disturb you. They come to our assembly, and them come in and them say herb on our table, abundantly sometimes. And you just have to stand up and go away. Because the law that extend that they must not go in the Rastaman assembly and disturb them.
So they can only stop you on the street.
Well, if you pass on the street, then we'll stop you, and if you have heard, then we'll lock you down for that. You see. So that's what it reached today.
Good.
Yeah.